Today on the Wealth Cafe, we are going to dive into what it means to be a snowbird. No, we're not changing our life form here. So, for those of you that may not know the term, snowbird is typically people who, in retirement, they will spend half the year in a warmer weather state. And so typically, so I live in New Jersey. So in New Jersey, in the winter months, you typically see people who are moving down to Florida, Arizona. They go to places that are warmer because I don't want to have to deal with the snow and the sleet and all of the different weather forms that we have here during those colder months. And so, what they also do is they make sure that they are strategically picking states where they want to go to that have a lower tax rate. And that helps them during their retirement years. So, in order to do this, though, they need to make sure that they are spending just over 6 months in that state. So, example, if you were becoming a snowbird and going from New Jersey to Florida, you need to make sure you're just spending over 6 months in Florida to qualify for all of those tax deductions. However, there is so much more than going into snowbirding just for the money saving side of it. There's a lot of different factors to think about. And I find in a lot of my conversations with clients, they don't always think through what all goes into being a snowbird. So I want to break down today what some of those considerations are, what you need to be thinking about if this is something that you are interested in doing. But first, I found a really cool article. It was actually from This Old House. If you've ever watched the show, I remember watching it so much. And my parents would always be watching it growing up. It is actually from This Old House. And in the article, they talk about the best cities for snowbirds. This is a research article that they did that came out earlier this year. So it came out March 11th, 2025. So this is some updated research from them. So it says that the top five cities for snowbirds are Columbia, South Carolina, Orlando, Florida, Birmingham, Alabama, Charleston, South Carolina, excuse me. And the last one was Scottsdale, Arizona. I know Arizona has picked up a lot of popularity over the last several years. So some of the things they looked at in this article were the average temperature, how many restaurants are there per resident, which I thought was interesting, home values, and how these prices compare to the rest of the US. So that just gives you a little background on where some people are going. But I also want to take a dive into a lot of other factors that go into this choice. A lot of people think, oh my goodness, warm weather all the time. They want to play golf or pickleball or be able to walk on the beach every morning. And those all sound amazing to me. Don't get me wrong. I'd love to be able to go out and golf and play pickleball whenever I wanted to, and weather wasn't a factor. However, so much more goes into snowbirding. So let's talk about some of it. The first of which is there's a lot of cost that actually goes into being a snowbird. People think, oh, this is great. I'm going to become, I keep going back to the example of Florida because it's so popular in this area. And they think, I'm going to go to Florida and, I'll come back every, summer. I'll come back and live in New Jersey or, whatever colder state they live in. There's a lot of cost that goes into number one, maintaining both places, right? When you're not in the other location. So let's say right now, it's coming up on spring and warmer weather. So you might be thinking about coming back to the New Jersey or the tri-state area. And so when you're away from that place in Florida, you need to make sure you have people that are able to maintain the home for you, whether it's lawn care, pool maintenance. And so these are all factors and things to consider when making that decision is you need to maintain both properties and have a team of people that can maintain them when you're not in those locations. And so it might be something of, what, we're going to make sure we live in a community that takes care of all of those things for us, right? They have the lawn care, the pools are shared, so nobody has to worry about the chlorine levels and getting it ready for the season. Keep in mind, that's going to come with HOA fees. So there's pros and cons of everything. And especially as we age, and if you're in those retirement years where you're snowbirding, you may decide like, hey, that's a worthwhile cost for us to not have to worry about, but one that needs to be factored in. The other thing is you're also going to be flying back and forth. And this is where I see a lot of clients, they forget why they stayed in this state to begin with. So if you're in New Jersey and you have kids, they may have stayed in that area too, right? So if you're going down to Florida, they may not necessarily come down with you. They might come and visit, right? A nice spring break, taking, visiting their parents and bringing the kids to go see grandma and grandpa. But you're going to miss a lot of those big milestones. And this is something I saw clients of mine a couple of years ago. They actually decided to no longer be snowbirds because they missed being in New Jersey and seeing their grandkids grow up and missing all of those big milestones, right? It's one thing, yes, when you can fly back for the holidays. And for some people, that's totally enough. But for this couple, as I was working with them, they were they were upset that they were missing, the smaller parties, right? The Sunday dinners, the hey, we're gonna go take the kids to the Easter egg hunt this weekend and it's not actually Easter, so you're gonna miss that. Or, the Passover dinners, whatever it might be, like missing those smaller milestones or then having to factor in flying back and forth to not miss those moments. And then you also have to be careful that you're not overspending your time in the state where you are in a resident. So they realized how much that they were missing in those moments and said, you know what? It's not worth it. It's not worth the tax savings to miss these big milestone moments. And they wanted to be around their kids and their grandkids for all of these things because you just don't get that time back. The other thing too to consider is the cost of healthcare. And are you covered in both states? So one of the issues that arises when people if you're not on Medicare, is if you have a supplemental policy, it may not work in both states. That's a big issue that comes up with the Get Covered Act. We went through this in our own family, is that we had somebody who was visiting New Jersey and they couldn't get any health coverage we needed, we would have to pay out of pocket because they were a North Carolina resident. So and we're not talking, as we know, healthcare costs, especially as you age, can be very expensive. So it would have been a $300,000 ticket out of pocket, all because their coverage wouldn't work in this state. So it's something you really need to assess and understand the nuances of, and what coverage would you have? Because it's one thing to just say, okay, we'll go to all our doctor's appointments in our home state. But emergencies happen, right? Especially as we age, and you never know what can happen while you're traveling. So you want to make sure that you're covered should something happen. Now, the other thing is we talked a little bit about this home maintenance, but what are you going to do leaving another property empty for that amount of time, right? Are you going to rent it out, Airbnb it? Or is it something you want to just have sitting empty? And then you need to think about the security costs, right? Are we making sure that we are, maintaining the property? It looks like people are there. Things to consider, right? And especially too in the world we live in where everyone has a Ring camera, it seems so easy to set that aside, but people can see you leaving. And especially in these communities, they'll know, hey, these people are all snowbirds, they won't be here. So you need to make sure that you are ready for those security costs that come with it, and also having, once again, the maintenance on that property. So also consider, when we do estate plans, we do them state specific. And so if a rule changes in one state, we go and update it because we want to make sure it is for the state in which you are a resident. So having property in multiple states. Let's say you maintain that property in Florida and also maintain another property in New Jersey. You want to make sure that you are working with both your legal and your financial team to understand and communicate to them like, hey, here's where we are a resident and here's where we own different properties. And they need to make sure that you are covered for estate planning purposes in both areas, because there can be small little nuances that change from state to state. You might be sitting here thinking, oh, well, we, are Florida residents, so therefore any tax implications, we're not that worried. But because you have a property in New Jersey, in this example, things could really change. Make sure you're working with your team. Make sure you are communicating with them, all the different places you have your properties and where you are a resident. And especially if you are changing, make sure that's all communicated to them so they can get things updated. It might even happen where, let's say, you start working with your financial advisor and estate attorney when you are just a New Jersey resident, but make sure you let them know the moment it happens when you say, hey, this is the year, and also ask them, right? Is this a good year for us, from the financial and estate planning side to make that jump and become the full-time Florida residents? The other thing to think about is having community and social in these different areas is going to be a little difficult to maintain, right? You're bouncing back and forth between two places. And especially if you have family in one place and you're living in the other, it's always going to feel like you're missing things because you're going to try to build up. I'm really harping on this Florida example this episode, but that's okay. We're going to keep rolling with it. Feel free to replace it with whatever state you would want to be in and live in and go back and forth with. It all still applies. Let's say that you are living in Florida full time. You're starting to build up community and you want to you're meeting new people. You're on the pickleball courts, you have new friends. When you are back in New Jersey visiting family, you're going to miss out on some of those things, right? You're going to be away, especially if it's for months at a time. It's going to be difficult to maintain these relationships and vice versa. As I mentioned before, this is something a client of mine really struggled with because they always felt like they were being divided into two places. They had their family in one, and so they were missing all of these milestones. And then they still wanted to build community and have new friends and a life in Florida. And so they felt so torn all the time because they wanted to go visit the family in New Jersey, but being in New Jersey meant missing things in Florida. It's funny, even as we age, none of this ever changes. It's always that, fear of missing out, but it is a real thing. And especially in this time of your life when you want to be enjoying and fully immersed in what you're doing, you're, at this point, probably not working and you want to have that fulfilling retirement life. It's hard to balance the two. So keep in mind that that is going to be a consideration. Now, the other thing is having flexibility in your accounts. And I mean this for having that extra emergency cushion, right? And I always tell people this, especially if they live far away from their families. I have a lot of clients that will say, hey, I'm going to go spend a stint in Europe. And I always say, make sure you leave buffer in your emergency account for that last minute plane ticket, right? Let's say that something happens and you need to go back to New Jersey because somebody in the family had something happen. Or let's say you need to fly back to Florida last minute because there's a hurricane coming in and you need to go and pack up the house or do something to, get it prepared. Are you financially in a place where it wouldn't disrupt your life to go and make those changes? That's not the moment where where you want to have to call your financial advisor and say, hey, we need emergency plane tickets to X, Y, and Z. Can we sell some stock? Because if the markets are down, never the place you want to be in. So make sure you have those emergency buffers in there in case little nuances happen, right? Life happens. And at this point, I think we all know that. But really, when you are living in these two different places, splitting time, you have friends and family in all different spots, you want to make sure that you can financially pay to be in both spots. So there's a lot of different nuances that come with being a snowbird. And it's not as simple as like, well, we've always just wanted to live in Florida, so that's what we're going to do. When it comes to family, the people that we love, being around them, a lot of times people realize that that's not worth the price of going to different places. Or it might be. You might say, you know what, being around our family for 6 months a year or a little less and having them come down and visit us is everything that we need. And that is awesome. And I just want you to make sure that you are prepared for the emergencies, talking to your estate attorneys and really having them help you navigate both the transition and also the time while you are bouncing between these two places, right? There's a lot of different financial pieces moving on with maintaining two homes, having the estate piece, as we talked about, and also the taxes and making sure that you are qualifying for that lower tax state. If you have any questions on anything that we talked about, or you want to map out what it looks like to be a snowbird and have that type of financial plan, please make sure you reach out to us. You can apply for an intro call by going to tanisfingroup.com/contact. And if there are any questions, please leave them below in the comment section and we would love to talk about them. Lastly, I will also share that if there are any topics that you want us to cover on future episodes, please feel free to message me on Instagram at TanisFinGroup, and I'd love to hear from you or comment below any topics that you would like to see us cover. Can't wait to see you next time, and happy snowbirding.